Library. We're happy to have you here, and we're happy to have author Jane Healy, who is the author of the Saturday Evening Girls Club. So welcome. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for coming on this rainy, miserable night. I was like, you just never know, but I always say to people, my friends and I are saying, it's a miracle whenever someone reads your book, and it's even more a miracle when anyone shows up for your talk. So I haven't done this for a couple months. It's good to get the practice, get back in the groove.
We're not scary.
It's a good crowd, so thank you. And I gotta make sure the arrows work. I want to talk about 3 things. How I first learned about the Saturday Evening Girls Club, and then the history behind the story, and how I ultimately ended up writing it and publishing it. It came out about 1.5 years ago. So I used to be actually a product manager in high tech, and then when my girls were born, they're 15 and 12 now, I started freelance writing, and I ended up, when you're a freelance writer, you take whatever jobs you can get, and I ended up doing a lot of shelter magazines, so like New England Home, Home and Garden, Boston Home. I wrote a lot of articles for them, and one day my editor was like, hey, do you have any expertise in, or interest in antiquing? Do you collect things? And I was like, no, I don't. And she's like, well, you're gonna write a column on antiques now, monthly. And so I said, okay, well, bring it on. So we came up with an editorial calendar, and we did Danvers pottery, all New England-based antiques. Danvers pottery, and Saturday Evening Girls pottery was, I think, maybe sandwich glass was another one we did. Saturday Evening Girls pottery was, I think, my 3rd article. And so I learned that it was an iconic example of the arts and crafts movement of the early 1900s. The arts and crafts movement started in the United Kingdom, and it was really a response to industrialization. So artists and craftsmen were like, we're going to take this back in-house and make beautiful things for the home, but that are unique and lovely, but that you can use every day. So other examples, you might have heard of our Dedham pottery. They have like the gray with the blue bunnies on it. That's a local one. Marblehead, that's another one that's local. And Newcomb pottery, which is in New Orleans. So Saturday Evening Girls pottery is known for clean, sharp lines. Can you see? I feel like I'm blocking
right
here. I know, I'm right in the
Well, I
middle.
can move. Do you want me to move? I'm moving over here.
Jumping right in
These
front of you.
guys here. Over here. How's that? I don't want to block you.
Clean, sharp lines, it's warm earth tones. They did a lot of animal and floral motifs that were really popular, and often they'd have a saying or a motto. And I have show and tell. I brought a couple pieces. This one I got as a bargain on eBay because it's been broken like 6 different times, and but I like it because it has this. It was also called Paul Revere pottery, so it has the Paul Revere pottery stamp on the back, and it's from 1928, and it was part of a children's bowl and plate set, a children's cereal bowl set, and it says Lorraine, her plate on it. So I will pass this around if you want to take a look. And then this one is from a little earlier and has a little more detail about the artist. Has a motto that says, "Oh, don't bother me," said the hen with one chick. It has the etching in addition to the actual design, which means that it's like just a little more valuable. On the back, it has SEG for Saturday Evening Girls. It has April 1913, and then FL for Fannie Levine, who was one of the more prolific artists at the time. So if you want to take a look at these.
Yeah, that's why they were sitting there.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
They're very sturdy. They've been around for a while. So they did a lot of different types of sets. They did children's bowl sets, tiles, bowls, salad bowls. In the book, they did a wedding set for one of the women in the club, and that was something that they did when people got engaged. They do a wedding set for someone. Pitchers, mugs, candlesticks, all sorts of things. And in fact, I have a book, I think with Dick, that I could show you that has, oh no, it's under here. It's sort of the catalog of all things Saturday Evening Girl pottery. If anyone's interested after, you can take a look. So one thing I found really interesting writing the article was that it's become highly collectible and highly valuable today. It's really interesting. I window shop on eBay. I don't often purchase. I mostly, except for the one that was $70. But the prices range from less than $100 to several $1,000s. And the value is based on the uniqueness of design, the condition. Best known artist Sarah Gallner is by far the best known artist. She has pieces, some of her pieces are in the MFA and in the Met and in smaller museums around the country. Fannie Levine is probably the second best known. And then people always ask me, where can you find Saturday Evening Girl pottery if I'm interested in buying? And eBay has reputable dealers. There's also JMW Gallery in Cambridge. They are kind of experts in arts and crafts pottery. They always have some in-house for sale. Oh, and I just put this up for, I always look on eBay. This one was a salad bowl about this big with rabbits, and it was $2,000 on eBay recently. So, yeah. So, I love to show this slide because this chrysanthemum vase was probably about yay big. Sarah Gallner, it was designed by Sarah Gallner. It's at the MFA in Boston now. They don't always have it on display, but it's estimated worth between $250,000 and $500,000 because it's so unique and beautiful. But Jim at JMW Gallery in Cambridge always says, like, there is a rumor that there's another one out there, so that, you know, if you have any Italian or Jewish relatives, you should check your basements and attics, because you never know. So I finished the article. My editor was super happy, but I was really intrigued by this story. I grew up in Arlington. I've lived in the Boston area my whole life, and I never heard of these women. And so I decided, even after I finished the article, to kind of pull that thread and do a little more research and find out who they were. So Saturday Evening Girls Club really began as a book club on Saturday evenings at the library. It was started by Edith Gruyere. This is a picture of her when she's older, but she started it when she was a young librarian in the North End. And because she saw that, you know, there were outlets for young men in the North End at the time, but if you were intellectually curious, as a young woman, there wasn't a lot for you. And so she started this story hour, she called it, and it became so popular that she decided that this need was bigger than her original plan and wanted to expand it and make a formalized club for these young women. So she enlisted the help of another really fascinating character in Boston history, Helen Starrow of the Starrow Drive family. She was a Boston philanthropist. She was very involved in the women's movement and the settlement movement back then. And so Edith Gruyere was a good friend of hers and pitched the idea, and Starrow loved the idea because she loved the idea of helping these young women. And she actually purchased 18 Hull Street in the North End for the purposes of starting this club. And so they recruited, you know, they had a bunch of young women were interested. They had club rules, they had officers, they had a newsletter. And the most interesting thing is they really pulled people from all over the city, rabbis and doctors and lawyers and professors, and really offered kind of an informal higher education for these women. And they did dancing and dramatic productions too as fundraisers. There's a chapter in the book where they perform at Isabella Stewart Gardner's house, which is now the museum, and that was based on my research. They weren't treated particularly well there, but they performed the Merchant of Venice as like a fundraiser for the clubs. And Helen Starrow was good friends with Isabella Stewart Gardner. That's how that happened. But because they were poor immigrant girls, they weren't treated, you know, particularly well by the upper class at the time. So the club was a huge success. At its height, it serviced over 300 girls and young women.
Wow.
There was a club for every day of the week at one point, you know, starting with the Monday Evening Girls Club was like the 7 to 10-year-olds, and every day after that. And it became a big deal to graduate from Friday Evening Girls Club to the Saturday Evening Girls. One thing that was interesting that I thought was very ahead of its time is that the high school, I mean the girls that were out of high school and who were working girls or possibly going to college would go back to the schools, high school and grammar school, to make sure that the girls were showing up for school and doing their homework and getting decent grades. They had like this mentoring program that was very ahead of its time. So the pottery shop started a little bit later. the club started in 1899. Helen and Edith wanted to start a business because a lot of these women were working in horrible factory jobs, and they said, you know, maybe we can't provide all of them with jobs, but some of them would be great. And so they didn't know what sort of business they wanted to start. They enlisted the help of Edith Brown, who was an MFA trained artist. She was actually a children's illustrator, which I think if you look at the designs, it has that aesthetic. Edith and Edith were sent on a trip to Europe by Helen Starrow, and they learned about this arts and crafts movement happening. And when they came back, they said, this is our business. And Edith Brown said, you know, I will be sort of the artistic visionary for it. I can do this. I will train these women. And Helen Starrow said, absolutely, and I will fund the whole thing. So, yeah. So it was financed by Starrow. These are some of the women working on some of the pieces in the club at 18 Hull Street. It employed about a dozen girls full time, and then other girls worked a couple hours a week to save up enough money so that they could give their parents the 1 week's salary in the summer and go to Helen's camp in Gloucester. She had a camp that she was incredibly generous. And you know, for anyone to take a vacation in 1908 was, you know, unheard of. But they still, you know, when they were very old, they still talked about it as some of the best times of their lives. So it was very successful artistically, but not financially. It was, you know, lots of national awards and recognition. But it never really got off the ground financially. It moved to Brighton in 1915, to Notting Hill Road in Brighton, which was considered the country back then. But and Helen once again built this beautiful cottage and this beautiful shop downstairs. But she always sort of financially bolstered it and never really made any money. And it remained in business until the beginning of World War II. The clubs were really popular up until the First World War. Club members had reunions until they were well into old age. And one thing I thought that was really interesting was Kate Clifford Larson is a local historian. She's written, recently wrote a book about Rosemary Kennedy, and she did her doctoral thesis, and she compared Saturday Evening Girl Club members versus non-club members, and what she found was that the club members were more upwardly mobile throughout the course of their lives, and they were better educated, and they had better paying jobs. And there's one character in my book who receives a scholarship from Helen Starrow, but she was really just a composite of many, many women who received scholarships for 2-year programs, 4-year programs from Helen Starrow, from the Starrows. So I had accumulated all this research in between different freelance writing jobs, and told my husband, I've always wanted to write fiction. I dabbled in fiction. I'm like, I think this is my fiction project. And he was like, yeah, go for it. Can't be that hard. Yeah, let's do this. So in between freelance work and nap times and dealing with my kids, like I slowly eked away at a manuscript. I was super naive. I thought I'd just like whip this thing out because I was a writer, and how hard can it be? But it's a whole different animal than writing nonfiction. And so over time, I was very involved with Grub Street Writers, which is a great writers organization in Boston. I had a couple good mentors there. I have a writers group from Boston Magazine, and the 4 of us still share pages. And I felt like 5, almost 6 years ago now, I felt like I had a solid manuscript. And I started sending it out. And I started getting great responses from agents. The publishing process, you send it to an agent. If an agent signs you, they will sell it to a publisher. And so I started getting great responses from agents, lots of requests. I was a finalist for an award in Boston, the Penn New England Discovery Award. Like, momentum was in my favor. I was totally pumped, and then crickets. Like, all of a sudden, like, rejections started rolling in, and I really thought, like, I naively thought, like, oh, this is gonna be, this is happening. I'm good. Like, and I didn't, at the time, like, looking back on it, I mean, some people write 4 or 5 novels, and it's the 5th one that gets published. Like, you don't really, it doesn't even usually happen with your first one. So at that, I think I hit about 75 rejections, and I know people go on for thousands, and I'm like, I cannot do this. I can't take another bit of rejection. I need to, like, make some money writing and I shelved it. And I worked on some other fiction, and I helped write a business book and started like doing my money-making freelance writing stuff again. And then I took my mother-in-law almost 2 years ago now I was in Atlanta with her, and I took her to see the movie Brooklyn, which is based on the book by Colm Tobin about a group of immigrant women, or one immigrant woman, but it's based on the immigrant experience. And I left the theater really angry, like really annoyed. Just like, I wrote an immigrant book, and his book got published, and why didn't I get mine? And so I think with publishing though, like things are cyclical, timing is everything. The market had improved for immigrant fiction, like Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet is another one, Orphan Train I felt like my timing might be better. So I decided to send out, they're called query letters, one last time to agents, and I started putting it on my list. I had also heard about this contest called Kindle Scout, where you give them your manuscript and they put it online, and it's like a crowdsourced publishing contest, and people all around the world vote for whether they think it deserves to be published. So I put it up there because I knew that editors and agents checked it out for potential projects. And that night I put it up there, I said to my husband, I'm only doing this because I want Danielle Marshall of Lake Union Publishing to call, to see it and offer me a publishing deal. And we were both like, yes, that's my dream, whatever, And so kept on getting my letters together, I sent my letters out, and then 30 days later, I found out that I had won Kindle Publishing. But, and there's lots of winners, it wasn't just like me, but I won. But I was a little disappointed because that only means you got like a digital book deal, which was never really my plan. And then 2 days later, I was like hiding in my closet trying to do a conference call with my girls screaming downstairs, and my phone beeps and someone's like, oh, we have Danielle Marshall of Lake Union Publishing on the phone for you, and she'd like to talk about a book deal. So my head exploded, I could barely speak to her, but after that it happened really quickly. From the time we talked, I signed a contract in like June 2016, and then it came out in April of 2017. So yeah, it was a crazy ride, and and it's been crazy since, but in a good way. And I always like to conclude, there's two, I don't know if you've read the book, but there's a proverb at the beginning of each chapter, an Italian or a Jewish proverb that ties in with the theme of the chapters. And someone asked me at a talk, what's the takeaways for this book? And the two most popular proverbs by far are everybody is kneaded out of the same dough but not baked in the same oven. That's a Jewish proverb. And a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle, and that's an Italian proverb. And this is ultimately the story of women helping women across cultures and across classes. And I think it's more important than ever to share stories like this. So thank you for listening. Oh, and my website is www.janehealy.com, and my email is jane@janehealy.com.
Okay.
www.janehealy.com and jane@janehealy.com. Is that good? I wasn't expecting to be on TV, sorry. Do you have any questions?
You gonna write another book?
I am. Thank you for asking. Actually, I already did.
You already did?
Yes. And I forgot I just made this slide before I sent this to you. So this
What a
is
coincidence.
so the Beantown Girls is coming out February 5th, and it's based on the true story of the Red Cross Clubmobile girls of World War II. They were also called the Donut Dollies. And they were some of the only women allowed on the front lines of the war in World War II. So their stories were fascinating. It's fiction, but it's based on a multitude of their true stories. Yeah. Yeah. So it takes place in the European Theater of Operations because that was some of those women had the most amazing diaries and letters, and so I base most of my research on their experiences. So that's coming out in February.
Did you meet any of them personally?
They had to be over 25 of the Saturday Evening Girls, or of Oh, no, so the Clubmobile girls had to be over 25 to be in the program, so they would be in their mid to late 90s now, but someone the other day just sent me an article. One of them turned 100 years old in Illinois, so I'm trying to get in touch with her through the writer of the article. It was pretty amazing. I think she might be one of the last ones alive. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I'm excited. I'm really pumped about this one. Really excited about it.
So the girls in the Saturday evening girls club, were they all different, from all different countries, or were they mostly, like Italians or Jews, or, were they from all over?
No, that's a great question. They were Eastern European
Mostly,
Jewish,
yeah.
Russian, Eastern Europe, and Italy, Sicily and Italy. I don't know if it was half and half, but it was pretty mixed, which was intriguing to me because I didn't even realize how many Jewish people were in the North End in the early 1900s. It was a really diverse neighborhood, and these girls, because they were sort of first generation English speaking, their parents might not have been friends, but they were able to sort of cross that barrier, which was really cool. Yeah. Thank you.
So again,
www.janehealy.com? Jane@janehealy.com. Okay. Thank you.
Tell them how crowded the North End was back in those days.
oh, it was terrible.
Oh, yes.
You were there?
So, yeah, it was, one thing, and I missed a point tonight, but it was really, I went with heartwarming and hopeful with this story, even though I could have gone really dark. I mean, the infant and child mortality rate was the highest in the city by far, and the population density, by some accounts, was higher than Calcutta, India. It was very Dickensian place at the time. But these women were so positive, these Saturday evening girls were so positive and so forward-thinking that I really wanted to strike a more heartwarming and hopeful tone. They never felt sorry for themselves. They always, got on with life and were looking forward, not back. So.
But when you say they were girls, are we talking, were the majority of them, young women like 20, or were they, in their 30s, their 40s, or?
The majority of them were like late teens, early 20s. But it went on long enough that some of them got married, had babies, and still remained in the club. And the interesting thing too was it wasn't like the Girl Scouts where like different groups would come in. This was sort of a one-time thing. And so these women, when it ended, but they still had reunions every year when they were well into their 70s and 80s too, because they were so close.
Did you get to talk with some of the family members, or?
I didn't. I've met them since, I've heard from them since. I met one of them, showed up, I was with Dick at a restaurant called Stellina's in Watertown, and I did a talk there, and this woman came rushing in at the end of the night and was like, I just moved here from Brooklyn, but my friend said we had to come because my grandmother was one of the original Saturday evening girls. So that was really amazing. And she brought some of their newsletters, and it was awesome. Yeah, yeah, really cool. And I've heard from social media, I've heard from another grandson and another granddaughter too.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask about the parents' papers later.
Yeah,
That's interesting, the paper.
yeah. So, in terms of research, it was the Schlesinger Library at Harvard. They're amazing. It's a lot of American women's history, and they had boxes of photos and letters and newsletters, and just they were probably my best source, source material. There's some books that I have and different things, the thesis I mentioned, but Harvard was terrific. And with this, and actually with the Clubmobile girls as well, when I was starting to accumulate research, I had like a half dozen books and some online sources, and then I called them and they're like, we have 13 boxes of letters and diaries and pictures. Yeah. They had their uniform, they had one of the full uniforms in Harvard, preserved. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you said you learned a lot about these girls, but you decided to take it one way. And I have to say, I purposefully didn't read your book yet. I just wanted to go here and then.
Oh, thank you.
get it. But, yeah, we both were in antique, so we've had.
Oh,
the
no way,
pottery
okay.
And have just read little blurbs about the girls, and so here you have a whole
Picture.
picture of them. You decided to go positive, but you said there's a lot of stories to.
Well, just in terms of like the you know, their quality of life was not amazing. You know, they were very poor. It was not lost on them that they were poor, but they were just really, you know, incredible, like forward-thinking women, really ambitious for their time. And even though they were women in their, they were really very smart. You know, a lot of them went on for secondary education at a time when not many did. You mentioned antiquing, so this book is by Meg Chalmers and Judy Young. They were antique dealers down the Cape, and this is basically like the Bible of all the pieces of the pottery. If you want to take a look, it's pretty cool. So that was one of my sources as well. Dick has another book back there. Oh,
It's under the,
oh, right, because I was propping it up. So this other one was another little one by Noni Gadsden, who I believe is a relative of Sarah Gallner, and she wrote this about her.
So has anyone preserved the buildings they were working in at all, or no?
No,
No, 'cause
yeah,
that doesn't count.
but the school, is it the North Bennett Street Industrial
Right.
School?
Yeah.
So that's kind of attached to the North End Library, or was, and they have a collection of the pottery there.
Oh, really?
They do, and 18 Hull Street, I've had a lot of questions like, is it still the same building?
Yes.
It's not, and I get the question a lot, so I emailed the city of Boston, and they're like, you'd have to like look through the archives yourself, but we know that it changed hands, it went into the Starrow family around 1906.
Yep.
It was, at one point, it was not a brownstone, so but
Yeah.
it looks pretty mod.
Like, what about over in Brighton?
I don't know about the Brighton.
Yeah.
I met someone at one of these talks who had been to the house. It's a residential house now,
Oh,
so,
okay, yeah.
but they know that of the history there. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
that fellow in Cambridge that has that shop, doesn't he get some of his stuff from family members?
He does. Yeah, he has relationships with the family members that'll call him when they want to unload some pieces. So.
I did on Arlington Town Day, I had a booth I was selling, and she had a book there, and the lady came up and asked, is this about the pottery? And I said, well, it is, but it's a fiction. And then she said, my grandmother gave me a bowl, I have a bowl. And I said to her, those things are worth pretty, she said, no, I looked it up, it was only worth $40. So I said to her, is it in good shape? She said, yeah. I said, I'll give you $40.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we did a talk, I was at the Girl Scouts in Waltham. They have a collection because Helen Starrow was one of the founders, essentially, of the Girl Scouts in America. And when I walked in, they had it all like displayed, no security, and they had like 30 pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you even know, like this is like $30,000 worth of stuff, and they're like, yeah, we know, we'll lock it up after the talk. Like they had another place to put it, but I was.
Yeah, the guy from Cambridge came, the guy that's the expert on it, he said, I've never ever seen one of these.
Yeah.
I forget what it was.
Oh, someone had made Helen Starrow's husband like a inkwell with his initials on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just a,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen this stuff before.
So that was the one I was gonna steal.
Yeah, that was a good one. That's worth a lot. Yeah, that was pretty unique.
Oh, nice, beautiful.
And the tiles, some of the tiles are,
Yeah.
yeah.
the pendant
Mm.
made out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, so you guys have looked at these?
Thank you.
Yes, and here's your hallmarks.
Yeah.
You guys are into this, huh?
Mom's she's retired now, but
Retired
was
antique
an
dealer.
antique dealer.
Oh, good for
and
you.
then I dabbled in it with her, so
45 years.
we actually had a piece at one point.
Oh, wow,
And
okay.
saw the actually, I think
Interesting.
we started with one of the Paul Revere hallmarks, and then looked back and then saw the SEG at some point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they call Paul Revere just because they were in this neighborhood?
Yeah, so the shop in real life was called the Paul Revere Pottery Shop, but just because it was too confusing in the book, I just stuck with Saturday Evening Girl Pottery. And
Right.
since then, it's really known more, I would say, as Saturday Evening Girl Pottery.
Oh, okay.
But, and the stamps are, you don't see the, at least in the pieces I've seen, you don't see the stamps very often. Like the Girl Scout ones, I didn't see many of the stamps. That's pretty unusual. Yeah.
But the building was actually down the street from the Paul Revere house.
Yes,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, was it
Right, so
Italian,
yeah,
north end,
it's really
like,
close,
yeah,
like
okay.
kitty corner to
Yeah.
the old North Church.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, so
Oh, it's
that's
right
why they
here,
called
yeah,
it,
okay,
yeah, yeah. That's why they called it Paul Revere Pottery.
That's
Yeah.
great though.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
And the strange part of it is none of the girls could afford their pottery now.
Oh, of course.
I know, I always think of that,
I know.
if they only knew.
It's like anything, yes.
Yeah,
It's like anything.
Yeah.
You don't think anything of it, just, these things and then the behavior. But that's why the antique dealers, they hate to part with something that they start with in the beginning,
Oh,
you
yeah.
keep it, I'm not gonna put it in the shop, and you just,
That's why
you
I
know, you
didn't
get
make
caught
it
on
store.
different things.
Right, I get it, I
Once a
do.
dealer, you're always a dealer.
Mhm, yeah,
So you've written, you've been writing nonfiction and then now you've written 2 historical fiction.
Yes.
Are you enjoying still both of
This
them,
is
or
what I was
you
just gonna ask you.
see yourself just sticking with historical fiction now, or?
You know, if this second one goes well, knock on wood, like I hope to stick with writing historical fiction. I have, I'm trying to find the time to get my next proposal ready for my publisher and also start promoting the next book. And so we'll see how this one goes. I'd like to, but it's a crazy industry. It's pretty competitive and brutal, but thankfully I have people like Dick Haley helping me out, so, yeah.
Well, we have to get Meryl Streep or something interested in this.
Right, I
She
know.
could play Mrs. Stirrup.
I know, my husband's like, when's
No, she
the
should be one of the
movie?
girls.
Oh, she's in town,
She should be
actually.
one of the girls.
She's filming Little Women, Meryl Streep, in
Oh,
Boston
she?
this month.
She's in
Yes,
Wow.
I know.
She's in
Well, give her a call.
I know, right? Give her a book. I'm sure she has no security around her. Yeah.
Sure, invited a tea.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
you could be the next Louisa May Alcott.
I know. That's the dream, right? No, I know that. I know they're filming because they were looking for extras, and I was trying to convince my daughters to be extras in the movie to go, but I couldn't get them to do it.
So what was it like for you when you actually wrote the last word and you knew you were done?
For this one, it was so long ago.
Well, that was your first book, right?
First book,
First
yeah.
book you ever wrote.
Yeah, I
Big
had,
book.
honestly, I burst into tears. I had a good cry. Yeah, it's because it's like so exhausting and emotional, and and this next book was, it's more of a bigger emotional, heartbreaking story, and I was crying in Starbucks like all the time. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, so when I finished this one, I knew it wasn't finished, but just hitting that, like writing that at the end, there's
Yeah.
nothing like it. Like, for the first time ever, it was, I definitely had a good cry.
Yeah.
My poor husband, yeah.
Stop writing books.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and it was a long road, as it always is. Like, I have a couple girlfriends that I meet with regularly for coffee that are writers, and they, like me, do a lot of freelance work, but both are trying to get their first novel published, and I'm just like trying to be a cheerleader for them all the time, because I know how hard it is, and I do believe part of publishing is persistence, like not giving up after the first 75 rejections or more, so.
Was it
Yeah.
easier writing the second, the meantime?
In some ways it was. And I was on deadline, so that was a whole new thing. That was like kind of terrifying and exhausting. But in some ways it was, because I feel like I learned a lot from this one.
Same publisher?
Same publisher. Yeah. So that was.
Wanted you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that was awesome. And they've been great. They're great to work with. They give me a lot more input on things like the cover. Like this is a lot of people think this is the ocean behind it. It's actually grass. I always think but they did a historical photo shoot for the cover. They had to make sure we got the dresses right, the hair right, the pottery color right, the yellow. So they give me a lot of more input than what I hear other publishers give in terms of this type of stuff. So they've been good. Yeah, knock on wood, they've been really good. So, yeah. So thank you so much for coming out on this rainy, rainy night. Yeah.
This is wonderful.
Thank you.